1. The setting is a hot and sunny Thursday afternoon, and I am a 30-year-old male wrapped up in work since I work very early mornings on Thursdays and get the afternoon off. I decided to wash my car since it got covered in dust from gravel roads, and being surrounded by lakes, the front gets covered in bugs. Gross, I know. So I break out my equipment power washer, foam blaster, buckets, new car soap, speaker to listen to music, and a little cooler with refreshments. I just finished spraying my car with spray soap on to clean when my neighbor, who was also washing his Escalade, waved me over. "Hey, OP, can I ask you for some help?" "Sure, what's up?" "Can you blast that dirt off the bottom for me? The missies took the car out and somehow this happened." I took a quick look. It's got some mud pretty good caked on, but not impossible to get off. "Sure, this will take just a couple of minutes." So I brought my pressure washer over, turned it on, and started spraying the dirt off while rocking out to Nickelback. Only took about 3, maybe 4 minutes, and I got it off. "Hey, those things work great cleaning. I need to invest in one. Thanks, OP." "Sure thing, happy to help." So I wrapped up and resumed my car washing while enjoying Nickelback's album Dark Horse, when a dirty Lincoln stops behind my car and the lady is waving me over. Now I should explain, I live at the end of the road. We don't have anything people would drive to, unless you're visiting someone, and the main road is close to 8 blocks away. So yeah, not many cars drive by my house. Anyway, I walk up to the lady's car to see what she wants. Maybe she's lost or can't find someone's house. Nope, I was wrong. Here's a conversation. "Yes, can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes, since you just finished, can you wash my car? Also, I'd like the seats and carpets cleaned as well." I'm confused for a minute. What? Didn't you hear what I said? I'd like my car cleaned. I just got this, and already it's got dirt and bugs on it." "Sorry, no, but I'm not going to. But there's a couple of car washes down Main Street, and I think the shops offer it too." Karen, who clearly was never told no, looks at me and goes, "Why would I do that? You have everything to do it here. Just do it. You washed that guy's car. Now do the same for me, and make sure to use wax as well." "No, I didn't wash his car. I just quickly helped him get the dirt off. I'm only washing my car." "What did you say?" "Fine. How much for a wash?" "What? What, can't you hear? I said how much." "Lady, I don't know who you are, and frankly, I don't care. I'm only washing my car. If you need your car washed, go downtown." "What? Honestly, what is wrong with you kids today? You don't want to work and get money. This is ridiculous." She did go into a little tirade that I won't go into, but she then gassed it down towards Main Street. I looked at my neighbor, we both shook our heads, and resumed what we were doing. About 3 hours later, I was busy playing Call of Duty when someone rang my doorbell. I stopped and went to see who it was, and I opened the door and see a guy standing there. It's the guy who owns the lodge. "I am the guy who owns the lodge. Did a lady just ask if you can wash her car?" "Yeah, some lady did and acted like a toddler when I said no. Why?" "That lady was complaining that the guy over here was rude and didn't want to help her. If you see her, just ignore her. I'm not going to let them stay here anymore. The husband is nice, but she's a piece of work." "Okay, but just out of curiosity, there's a lodge over there?" "Yeah, we only do it over the summer and about 3 weeks during winter." So in one day I learned Karens can come get you anywhere and any time, and I live about 2 blocks from a lodge. A very interesting day. 2. I've been a bassist for about 20 years. 6 years ago, I put out an ad as a bassist seeking any local groups or budding projects, with a preference for metal, progressive, and other similar genres. I'd eventually receive a message from a guitarist who is looking to assemble musicians for such an idea. So I excitedly reply, and we are well on our way. The guitarist, Lavi, invites me over to his place so we can get to know each other. He rents a home on a farm with his girlfriend. They're completely nice and cordial, but I get the feeling that something is peculiar about Lavi. He's not rude or entitled, or overly expectant of me, and he's very happy to see that I'm skilled on my own instrument. But he's just one of those people that seems socially off. A little awkward, very tense, very straightforward with no humor. But what I came here for was music, and there was music. We could jam together pretty easily, and I could improvise through his songs on the first or second listen. Everything was going well. By the end, he tells me he's happy with me as a bass player and he wants me to meet some people. Next time we meet, I met a drummer named Spoon and a secondary guitarist and vocalist named Vincent. I brought a couple of beers and we slammed out some original jams for a solid few hours. This was a good fit, I thought. Vincent and Lavi were very forward-thinking, and they really seemed gung-ho about getting us playing live music, explaining all the ins and outs of their venues and circuits. Easy peasy. I'm just a guy with a bass and a rig, and all the free time in the world. But this felt like a free ride. However, 2 practices later, I'm told that this would be Spoon's last practice. Spoon cited work and eventually planned to move, which was perfectly reasonable. By this point, all 3 of them knew each other for years, and I was the newbie. But Spoon basically just disappeared, and I never heard from him again. That's life sometimes. The search for a drummer began, and before the next practice, Lavi told us he had invited a guy over to check out his skills before the next group practice, sort of like when I first met Lavi. That was fine, but when practice came around, Vincent and I asked him, "What about this guy?" And Lavi said, "Oh, nah, this guy sucked, like he was awful. He couldn't even do this or that," and very disparaging words followed. Lavi was going off about this person that neither me nor Vincent had ever met, and it almost felt like the two had gotten in a fight of some kind. Something ended up happening, and we postponed the practice that night. In this time, I had gotten a new job that would pay me double what I had been earning. I was ecstatic to get my life in order some. My new schedule only gave me every other week off, which forced us to adjust the practice schedule. But I think it goes without saying that my job needed to come before a 2 or 3 month-old band that hadn't played any shows yet. Next practice came around, and we had another drummer lined up. Lavi met this guy beforehand as well, and said, "He's better than the last guy." As an aside, Spoon was a fantastic drummer. I can completely get on board with having certain expectations, and when they're not met, it's frustrating. I never met the other guy, so maybe I thought he really wasn't good. We met with this new drummer, Craig. Craig was pretty chill. He picked things up quickly enough, and I thought, yeah, I could see this working out. We played some of our material, he could pick it up. When Lavi and Vince went to smoke, Craig and I jammed as a duo for a few minutes, and we were definitely a good dynamic fit. Spoon who? Craig was my drummer now. Not. In the week before the next practice, Lavi started saying some really crazy things out of context. I had to ask what he was talking about in the band chat, that Craig was still not in. He was saying how Craig is a fucking loser cuck, he's a sucky drummer. I told him he's a mama's boy to his face. I'm like, you what? Craig, we knew, lived with his girlfriend while her ex-boyfriend still lived there. There was some dynamic where Craig was basically helping to raise his girlfriend's kid from that ex, and, well, it's not a comfy subject, but not one that was causing Craig any evident emotional trouble. He was just living his life. In my mind, if the guy wanted to play drums, asked to play drums, had time to play drums, and was good at playing drums, I didn't care what his personal life was like. Lavi was very hung up on this, and he told us the course of their conversation. I texted Craig and asked him about it, and Craig painted it as so much worse. He told me that Lavi asked him about who he lived with, and Craig explained the situation. Craig said that Lavi proceeded to blow up at him in a way that was only hurtful. Insulted him, insulted his living situation, called him all manner of names, and told him he was a piss-poor musician. I tried to do some damage control and said, "Nobody else said that about you. I want you to know that you're great and your drums are on point. I'm gonna have words with Lavi." The damage had still burned the bridge, and we would have to go our separate ways regardless. Craig said it was no big deal, but the waters were poisoned for sure. I thanked him for everything, and prepared for the next move. I told Lavi outright that under no circumstances can he treat people like that. I laid the law down and told him I wouldn't let him ruin my reputation in the area music scene because he's a hothead. Playing in a band with someone who'd outright disparage random musicians from different life circumstances reflects poorly not only on the individual, but on the group they surround themselves with. He relented, and didn't have much to come back with other than an apology, and said he would apologize to Craig personally. I don't know if he did, but Craig was the bigger man to accept my apology from the start, so I hope that sufficed. We eventually found a drummer who worked great with us. No more drummer drama. We did it, boys. Story ain't over. Damn it. Lavi contacts me one day while I'm going into work. He tells me his girlfriend broke up with him and he needs someone to talk to. I'm about to say, damn sorry, I just got to work. But my boss comes to me and says, you want VTO? It was slow season. So I packed up, went to Taco Bell and got a whole bunch of tacos, bought some beer and wine, changed into some non-work clothes in my car and put on my support friend face. I headed over to his and just let him vent. Whenever he started going too quiet, I'd bring him back out of it by talking about music and more pleasant stuff. We eventually managed to invite Vincent over and the three of us had a good long hangout. We would have invited our new drummer, but he was in college, he lived pretty far away, and it was a school night. Lavi felt communicably better at the end of the night, and we were reinvigorated to play with our direction in mind. So things were going smoothly. Lavi texts me more and is open in communications. I thought this would be a good thing. One night he texts me and tells me we need to practice more. I told him he knows my schedule, and if he can only practice on weekends, Saturday and Sunday, that's kind of the way it has to be. 2 weekends out of every month, I work, and on the other 2 I have off. That's the way it's been for as long as I've had this job. He then says something that made my blood turn ice cold. Remember how I said he has no sense of humor? He isn't a joker, he isn't a funny guy. He is serious like a car crash 100% of the time. He says, do you really need a job that pays you that much? I just take a few seconds to process what he asked. I take into account the above information. I try to give him the benefit of the doubt, because there's no way he actually meant to say that. I text back, LOL, ? He says, I mean, if you're serious about being a musician, you have to make some sacrifices. I say, be careful. He tells me, you could be just as happy making less than a job that you have more free time in. I'm ashamed to say it, but I almost lost my temper. I wanted to tear into him. Now that he didn't have random drummers to yell at or a girlfriend at home to fight with, they fought a lot. He wanted to start a hot mess with me. Well, I managed to rely on my good old-fashioned internet poker face to give terse replies, let him get tangled up in his own BS, and dodge the pointless argument. I told him, whenever you do this, the only person you're hurting is yourself, and that it was time for me to move on. He started trying to backpedal immediately, saying, no, I didn't mean to say that. I said what I was thinking out loud. I never meant to hurt your feelings, I'm sorry. But I was already thinking about what I was going to do with that free weekend day I'd just gotten back. A week after, he tried to apologize again, telling me that if you'd be willing to forgive what I said, I'm really feeling good about the group we've got. I told him I've already picked up my rig from the practice spot, and those were the last words I'd ever say to him. Vincent messages me to catch the details, and I give him the short version. I decided to pick up jiu-jitsu again, so my time was my own again. I told him no hard feelings, he was still a good person, and I really valued what we had done. Years later, Vincent messaged me out of the blue and asks if I'd have any interest in joining a project. Lavi was not a part of it. I gave a big thumbs up, and now we're on the way for better horizons. 3. So my wife and I were having a dinner date a few months ago. Seated near us was a much younger couple. Like any younger, we could have been their parents. I'm not a nosy person, but the wife and I have been together almost 20 years. There are gaps in conversation when you've been together this long. They, obviously, just getting to know each other. Must have been a Tinder date or something. On the ride home, my wife and I got to talking about not remembering what it was like to date each other. We decided next chance we got, we would go on a Tinder date. We would tell all the stories we already know, what we do for work, favorite movies. We did it last weekend. It was fun, and I think we both picked up some things we had overlooked over the years. Then our kid got brought up by my wife, and I rolled with it, asked about the father and such. The game changed. She's said with all the stress at home and work she doesn't feel the spark. Things are too vanilla. She needs to try something new and adventurous. I start pouring myself into this fantasy, listing things I wish I could do with my wife, but she is always so tired and doesn't seem up for it. At this point, we're holding hands, leaning across the table, going over every special occasion act we are going to go through with each other. Well, this is where the karma hits from listening to the kids on their Tinder date. A wild Karen appears. She starts jumping our asses for being cheaters. My wife told her it was none of her business, and if some stranger would bang her like she's about to get banged, she might not be such a bitch. Called my wife a dirty whore. I told the woman I'm really hoping she's the dirtiest for me tonight. Well, she caused enough of a scene, the manager came out and made her and her friend leave. Wife and I kept playing our game, finished our meal and went home. We had the house to ourselves. I thought this was the end of it, but no. Karen took a creep shot of us before she came to confront us. She then posted it to some cheaters busting Facebook group with our city's name and the restaurant day and time. We have a mutual friend because the guy I work with saw it. They're all laughing at me for cheating on my wife with my wife. We got a pretty good laugh about it. I messaged the group mods. After one look at my profile, it's pretty obvious I'm married to the woman in the photo. They took her post down and put up something about false accusations can hurt as much as cheating. She went full Karen in that thread, till they banned her from somewhere she spent a lot of time posting. She isn't one of my friends, but I heard people were giving her a hard time on her personal profile, about being nosy and not knowing all the facts. The same friend said he saw her at a community event and got his wife to troll her. His wife went up to this Karen, arms locked with her teenage son, and begged her not to tell her husband she's with a man young enough to be her son. I guess this woman is a bitter divorcee, and is always judging people she thinks are whores. Now she's catching a lot of crap for making things up. I feel kind of bad for her. My wife and I never told anyone about the game we were playing. Everyone just thinks this lady had some kind of nervous break, seeing two married, happy people. 4. Trigger warning: mention of the process of self-removal from this planet. Basically, this all happened a couple of hours ago, and I'm still shaking from this. I'm a 20-year-old female, and my boyfriend, 21, lives back home. I was riding a train from him. On the train at first, I sat next to this lovely young lady, and we talked for a bit before she got off an hour later. I get both seats to myself for an hour, so I play Slime Rancher, which is my de-stressor. I love all of their little happy noises, they're so cute. I was happy, talking to people across from me while playing, in which I should explain them. There were these two people, somehow from my town, and offered to give me a ride because my original ride and I had a miscommunication. They were a little older than me and super cool people. Very happily I sat by them. And this is when the new guy decides to roll onto the train. He was an older gentleman in his 80s, and he seemed nice. He sat along the aisle while I sat in the window. I slept for an hour after he arrived, before slowly stirring to feeling something touching me. I looked up and his hand was pulling back from near my leg. Odd. I decided to watch his hand again, and sure enough, it's slinking its way towards my seat and near my thigh. At that point I said, "Nope," in my head and shoved my body as tight as I could against the window. Maybe he wanted more space, I don't know, but I really don't like being touched, and thought I should give him more space. I finally had the courage to look over at him and ask to trade seats. This means he will have more room and I can get away from him easily. This, thankfully, goes with no misfire, and now I'm close to the girls again, all is well, for 5 minutes. After a moment I notice he keeps looking at me. It's weird, but he's been staring quite a bit, and every time I look at him he looks back out the window. Here is where I'm asking my question, because some of my friends said sometimes old people just stare if they're curious, which I get, and I never saw exactly where he was staring. But it seemed to be the general area of my thighs and chest, which made me very uncomfortable. After a few hours we were on the train and he takes a call. This is the second one he's taken on the train. First one was when he just gotten on and was completely paying attention to the person on the phone. This time, however, he tried to ask me a question which I just shook my head as the answer. After the call, the conversation went like this. "Miss?" I ignore him. Miss, excuse me. Sir, I do not want to talk to you if I don't have to. Do you have a problem with me? You've been staring at me avidly this entire train ride and have made me uncomfortable. And from there it dissolved into him screaming at me, saying how he never stared at me, and that he served 26 years and that he has never been this disrespected, and he wished that I would not be on this earth through means of self, and that he had seen bigger and better, and I was an ugly piece of crap, and why would he even look at me? He told me if I was uncomfortable, I should crawl back into the hole my mother had me from to be comfortable. He wouldn't stop calling me a piece of shit. He walked off after a minute to the dining cart where I broke down. The girls next to me made me sit in front of them, and this nice dude, who was originally behind me, checked to make sure I was okay, but then the guy came back to the cart and got on the phone. He started talking about me as I was getting off, saying some girl was so rude to him. I genuinely feel like an asshole. I feel like I shouldn't have said anything, unless I knew for sure, and maybe he was a nice person put in a bad spot. Am I the asshole? 5. A little description on what I do for a living. I basically renovate and or paint rentals so people can move in and mess them up again. And sometimes I have to do this while they're occupied. Management companies for most rental companies will use cheap stock cabinets from their suppliers. But this particular management company uses a cabinet company. Nothing high-end, but still better than most. The resident of this story has a history of causing problems not only for his neighbors, but with management too. At this time, the resident's kitchen had flooded because of an old water tank. The maintenance supervisor and a rep of the cabinet company go in to measure up for a new kitchen and arrange an install date. I just happened to be there that day working on a vacant when the maintenance supervisor calls me asking if I would mind going over to measure for a countertop that they forgot to get, and was told the resident would be home. No problem. I go over, knocked, and introduced myself to the resident as the installer and why I was there. While I was there getting measurements, the resident pulls out a catalog and starts telling me that he wants these cabinets with this countertop with these features, pointing and showing me things that were nowhere cheap. And I'm just thinking to myself that there's no way in hell management is going to approve any of this. When the resident finally stops talking long enough for me to say anything, I inform him that I'm just the installer, and what management orders is what I have to install. With an annoyed look on his face and some tone to his voice, he shoves the catalog in my hands and tells me to make sure he gets what he picked. Taking the measurements and catalog down to the office, and talking to the maintenance supervisor when he sees the catalog, tells me that the resident was told no, he was getting the same cabinets every unit gets, which was cherry-finished cabinets with a bluish-gray top. I was informed that on the install date the resident would be away on vacation, which is good for me, no one to get in the way. The day of the install comes and goes without a problem, and I thought was the end of it. I was wrong. That Friday I was working another vacant rehab a few doors down when I start hearing loud screaming, cursing, banging noises from outside. Pop my head out the door to see the resident throwing busted-up pieces of the kitchen I just installed. When he sees me standing there, he starts coming towards me screaming, I installed the wrong shit, and that's not what he wanted, and cursing me out. By now, both management and maintenance supervisors are here, and the resident starts screaming and cursing them out. This goes on for a while, and the cops had to be called, when the resident started to take swings at us and ends up on his ass after the maintenance supervisor plants a "this is Sparta" kick in his chest. Management files an emergency eviction order, and the resident was gone by the end of the month. And I had to reinstall the kitchen all over again. The problem that I run into with most renters is that they don't seem to understand that as my customer is management company or the owner of the rental, that the renter has little to no say about what I have to do. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 118. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do boop the like button. If you'd like to support the channel and get the videos a little bit early, you can do so by joining my Patreon, which is linked in the description, as well as merchandise links, and you can make donations during videos and streams, which are appreciated but not required. Alright, let's see. What Nope, no other business today. So let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what is a fact you recently learned that you suddenly thought, I guess that makes sense, that you never given any thought to before until you learned it? Like recently, it never occurred to me that ice cream rolls aren't actually made of ice cream. Which, given how they're made, of course they're not. It makes perfect sense. You have to freeze them as you make them on the plate. But when I heard it said out loud, I thought, no, sure, that doesn't make sense. All right. Okay. So what are some of yours? Why don't you let me know in a comment below? And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.